The morning of June 4, 1942, found Lieutenant Mayo Kobayashi aboard the Japanese carrier Hiryu, his hands trembling as he studied reconnaissance photographs that defied all logic. Through the ready room porthole, he watched Admiral Yamaguchi Taman examining the same images with an expression that spoke not of anger or confusion, but of dawning horror. The photographs showed 3 American carriers at Midway, not the expected 2. Among them was a ship that should not have existed. USS Yorktown, which Japanese pilots had left burning and abandoned in the Coral Sea just 27 days earlier. The mathematical certainty of Operation M had just collapsed. Japanese intelligence had assured the fleet that only Enterprise and Hornet remained operational in the Pacific. Lexington lay on the ocean floor. Saratoga was under repair, and the new Essex-class carriers wouldn't be ready until 1943. Most critically, Yorktown had been confirmed destroyed at Coral Sea on May 8, when 18 Type 99 dive bombers had planted a direct hit that penetrated 5 decks and left her trailing oil, listing badly, and apparently finished. Yet here she was, very much alive, launching aircraft against the Japanese fleet. The sight shattered fundamental assumptions about American industrial capabilities that had shaped the entire Midway operation. In Japanese calculations, proper repair of such catastrophic battle damage required months of meticulous work in the finest naval yards. A carrier with a 551-pound bomb hole through 5 decks, ruptured fuel tanks, and destroyed compartments would need 90 days minimum for restoration. The reality behind Yorktown's impossible resurrection had begun 3 weeks earlier when Captain Elliot Buckmaster limped his damaged ship toward Pearl Harbor at 20 knots. Not the 6 knots Japanese R's had reported. During the 300-mile voyage home, his damage control teams performed their first miracle, approaching repairs with a philosophy foreign to Japanese thinking. Make it work, make it fast, make it fight. Chief Carpenter Boyd Mackenzie ignored standard damage control procedures, welding steel plates over damaged structural beams rather than properly replacing them. Engineers rebuilt systems using cannibalized parts and jury-rigged equipment meant for other purposes. The work was ugly but functional, creating what would later be called metal scabs over the ship's wounds. When Yorktown arrived at Pearl Harbor on May 27th, trailing a 10-mile oil slick and listing to port, Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch had estimated 90 days minimum for battle readiness. But Pearl Harbor in 1942 had transformed from a peacetime naval station into something unprecedented. A forward repair base operating at the edge of possibility. The salvage operations following December 7th had created a workforce that thought in terms of hours, not months. Admiral Chester Nimitz met the ship at the dock, and, unlike Japanese admirals who commanded from distant flagships, waded through oil, slicked water in dry dock number 1 to personally inspect the damage. With his pants soaked and hands black with oil, he turned to the yard's superintendent and delivered an impossible order. We must have this ship back in 3 days. The 3-day deadline wasn't arbitrary. In the basement of Building 1, just 400 yards from the dry dock, Commander Joseph Rochefort's Station Hypo had cracked JN-25, the Japanese Naval Operations Code. They knew AF meant Midway, they knew the attack date, and they knew the Japanese order of battle. Most crucially, they knew the Japanese expected to face only 2 carriers. Without Yorktown, Americans would face 4-2 odds, with her 3-4. Still unfavorable but possible. Before the dock fully drained, 400 workers swarmed aboard Yorktown in what would become a 72-hour marathon of controlled chaos. They came from every shop on the base: welders, electricians, ship fitters, machinists, many having worked through the night on other vessels. The repair defied Japanese industrial philosophy of careful planning and hierarchical approvals. Instead, supervisors made instant decisions. Workers crossed trade boundaries, and the only rule was to make her fight. The techniques would have horrified Japanese naval architects. Rather than cutting away damaged steel and fabricating replacement sections, workers left damaged structures in place and welded massive plates over everything. Ruptured fuel tanks were sealed with quick, hardening cement meant for runway repair. 3 demolished compartments were simply sealed off completely. Electrical cables were strung over decks instead of through proper conduits. The arithmetic was staggering: 20 tons of steel plate welded, 35 miles of electrical cable strung, 400 tons of contaminated fuel pumped out. Continuous arc welding drew so much power it caused rolling blackouts across Oahu, but civilians accepted the disruption without complaint. When the yard needed lumber, construction companies delivered without paperwork. On May 30th at 9:00 a.m., Yorktown departed with shipyard workers still aboard, continuing repairs as she gathered speed. The air group assembled on her flight deck was itself a testament to adaptability. Squadrons cobbled together from survivors and pilots who had never operated together. Chief Hull Technician Fingstag watched her leave and later said, "We sent her out looking like a fighter who'd been patched up between rounds." She wasn't pretty, but she could still throw punches. When Yorktown joined Enterprise and Hornet at Point Luck on June 2nd, the other carriers' crews were stunned. They had expected maybe a limping reserve ship. Instead, she was launching aircraft and running full flight operations. Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher understood that Yorktown's presence wasn't just about adding aircraft. It was about shattering Japanese assumptions built into months of meticulous planning. The Japanese had indeed planned every detail for facing 2 carriers. Aboard flagship Akogi, Admiral Nagumo Chuichi conducted final preparations with absolute confidence. 4 carriers with 248 aircraft against 2 American carriers with 150 aircraft seemed like certain victory. Captain Minoru Genda had war gained every scenario. And even if Americans achieved surprise, Japanese pilot superiority and numerical advantage would prevail. The only variable that could change the equation would be a 3rd American carrier, and intelligence confirmed that was impossible. The morning of June 4th began according to Japanese plans. At 4:30 a.m., 108 aircraft launched against Midway, while 108 remained in reserve for the American fleet. But as the morning progressed, confusion mounted. Scout planes reported 1 carrier, then 2, still within calculations. Then came the torpedo attacks that would reveal the truth. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led 15 TBD Devastators from Hornet against the Japanese fleet without fighter escort. All 15 were shot down, but their sacrifice pulled the Japanese combat air patrol down to sea level. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise followed with similar results. 10 of 14 shot down, no hits, but again drawing defending zeros low. At 9:15 a.m. came the revelation. As 12 more Devastators from Yorktown began their attack runs, Japanese lookouts counted the attacking aircraft, too many. The mathematics were wrong. There were 3 American carriers, not 2. On Hiryu's bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi calculated rapidly. 3 carriers changed everything. But before new orders could be issued, the dive bombers arrived. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, leading Yorktown's bombing Squadron 3, had gotten lost but found the Japanese by following a destroyer's wake. His 17 SPD Dauntlesses arrived over the Japanese fleet at the exact moment as Enterprise's bombers, not by plan, but by the accident of Yorktown's delayed launch due to her damaged boilers. From 14 Sarosan feet, Leslie looked down at 4 Japanese carriers with flight decks packed with armed and fueled aircraft, their combat air patrol at sea level. Within 6 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were burning. Soryu, hit by 3 bombs from Leslie's squadron, exploded in flames visible for 50 miles. Admiral Yamaguchi on Hiryu faced impossible odds, but launched 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters against the nearest American carrier, Yorktown. As the strike approached, Flight Leader Lieutenant Mayo Kobayashi studied the carrier through binoculars and felt his world tilt. The island structure, the flight deck configuration, This was Yorktown, the ship they had killed at Coral Sea. At 12:05 p.m., 3 bombs hit Yorktown, starting fires and rupturing steam lines. The ship went dead in the water. For the second time in 27 days, Japanese pilots left Yorktown burning and apparently finished. But even as she burned, Yorktown had already changed everything. Her morning strike had killed Soryu, and by absorbing Hiryu's attack, she protected Enterprise and Hornet for the counter strike that would kill Hiryu 4 hours later. The Pearl Harbor repairs, ugly and improvised, were holding. The welded plates hadn't split. Within an hour, 3 boilers were relit, fires contained, and counter flooding reduced the list. By 1:40 p.m., Yorktown was making 19 knots and refueling fighters, appearing so recovered that when Hiryu's second strike arrived at 2:30 p.m., the pilots believed they were attacking a different, undamaged carrier. This confusion prevented coordinated response before Enterprise's dive bombers found and killed Hiryu at 5:00 p.m. While Japanese submarine I-168 would ultimately doom Yorktown on June 6, the confusion she created had already sealed Japan's fate at Midway. Years later, participants would reflect on what Yorktown's presence meant. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida wrote, "The appearance of a third carrier shattered our planning. Every calculation assumed 2 carriers. When we understood 3 carriers were burning." Aviation machinist Tom Cheek from Enterprise recalled, "When we saw Yorktown at Point Luck, grown men actually cheered. She was patched like a prize fighter, ready for another round." The Japanese gradually understood what had happened. Admiral Matomu Yugoki wrote in his diary, "The appearance of Yorktown at Midway was not luck. It was preparation." In 1962, Lieutenant Commander Taneb, who had delivered Yorktown's death blow, visited Pearl Harbor and stood silent at Dry Dock No. 1 before saying, "Now I understand. We were fighting an idea that anything is possible if you work hard enough." Yorktown's repair revealed fundamental differences in approach. Japanese philosophy emphasized perfection, craftsmanship, and honor in detail. Damaged ships must be restored completely, with time less important than quality. American philosophy prioritized function, speed, and adaptation. Damaged ships need to fight, not look pretty, and time is everything. This difference extended beyond ship repair. Japan built exquisite aircraft, perfectly engineered and handcrafted. America built good enough aircraft by the thousands, each interchangeable and repairable with whatever was available. The Yorktown standard emerged: any ship that floats can be saved, and speed matters more than perfection. The 3 days Yorktown spent in dry dock may have been the most important 3 days of the Pacific War, not because of the repair itself, but because of what it represented. American democracy mobilized, American workers committed, American industry unleashed. The Japanese came to Midway expecting to fight the America they imagined slow, soft, divided. Instead, they met the America that existed fast, tough, united. When Japanese pilots saw Yorktown's aircraft over their carriers, they saw more than planes. They saw American will made manifest. The workers who repaired Yorktown didn't just fix a ship, they demonstrated a national characteristic that would win the war. In those 3 days, Pearl Harbor's workers proved that in America, impossible was just another word for not yet done. The final accounting reveals the mathematical truth of their achievement. Investment: 72 hours of labor, fun 400 workers, and 3 days removed from other projects. Returns: I-1 Japanese carrier definitively sunk, 2 Japanese strikes absorbed, 322 Japanese aircraft destroyed, and Japanese offensive capability ended permanently. American repair capability had exceeded Japanese estimates by 3,000%. Today, USS Yorktown lies 16,650 feet below the Pacific's surface, discovered by Robert Ballard in 1998. She rests upright, her battle damage still visible. Along with the Pearl Harbor repairs, welded plates, patched holes, ugly but functional fixes that got her to Midway. At Pearl Harbor, a plaque at Dry Dock No. 1 reads, "Here In 72 hours, American workers performed the impossible, repairing USS Yorktown for the Battle of Midway. Their labor changed history. The story of USS Yorktown's resurrection stands as eternal testimony to what free people can accomplish when they work together with common purpose. In just 72 hours, American workers didn't just repair a ship. They demonstrated that determination and ingenuity could overcome any obstacle. That function mattered more than form. That tomorrow's battle mattered more than yesterday's procedures. The ghost ship that haunted Japanese pilots at Midway wasn't supernatural. It was something far more powerful, proof that American democracy, fully mobilized, could accomplish anything. The workers didn't know they were making history. They only knew they had a job to do and 3 days to do it. In those 3 days, they proved a principle that would carry America through the war and beyond, that free people working with common purpose can achieve the impossible.